Okay, it is 2 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I can see there's still a few more folks kind of popping into the meeting here. So we'll catch them up as they come in. So today we're going to talk about Microsoft Power Automate. We're going to actually do some demonstrations on how to create flows and automate some business tasks. We have some that have been pre-baked and some that we're going to do on the fly. So really excited to cover this topic. I think it's going to be very practical for various roles that can really speak to most of the people in the room. I'm going to go ahead and switch to the next slide here. Bear with me. I got a couple screens open. And just for those that don't know SWICKtech, it'll be myself and Shane Kreining that'll be presenting. So I'm going to carry the beginning section here to just cover a few brief PowerPoint slides. I promise it's not going to be death by PowerPoint. And then Shane is going to take over and we're going to help participate on the demonstration side of things to actually show and tell and show the stuff off.
You're doing great, Eric. I think I might just kind of let you run with it and do the demo.
We've had this before. And so I'll just keep continuing here. So just real quick about myself. So I've been with SWICKtech for 3.5 years or so. I'm a client success associate, so I help with our sales, our marketing, and our account management. Shane, you carry the same title, I believe, but your role is a little bit more technical than mine in some cases.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. And hey, everybody, great to be here today. Like Eric said, I carry a similar title to him, Client Success Associate. Really, I work in an account management role at SWICKtech, interacting with all of our clients on a daily basis and making sure that their technology is doing what they need it to do.
Thank you, Shane. And just before we get totally rolling into everything here, I want to make a few housekeeping announcements. If there's questions along the way, please feel free to I think you can raise your hand. You can put them in the comments, and you can unmute yourself if you feel comfortable doing that. We'll try to take a couple of pauses in between a few slides, in between a few different transitions of demonstrations, so we can create that space to have some feedback if you do have questions. So we do want this to be an open dialogue. Go ahead, Shane.
Yeah, Eric, I just want to also mention, if you do feel comfortable using your microphone to ask a question during the session, that's great. Please do so. Just know we are going to be actively muting everybody throughout the session to try and keep the focus on the presentation and the demonstration. So if you unmute to try and say something and we remute you, just feel free to choose the raise your hand button across the top, and we'll be sure to call on you.
Yeah, we've been bestowed a lot of power with the mute all button, so we'll try to keep it under control here. And a little bit about SWICKtech. Again, for those that don't know, I know there's a mixed number of folks in the room that have either done business with SWICKtech, maybe heard of SWICKtech, or haven't heard of us ever or at all. So we are a managed service provider out of New Berlin, Wisconsin, which is right outside of Milwaukee. There's about 30 of us right now, and we're not actively all in the office. I joke and have been using the same photo for a year now almost, and it's been a while since we've all been physically together. So this was taken, pre-COVID era. But we help a lot of businesses act as their IT department. We can be 100% accountable for all things IT. We can be supplementary or complementary to an existing IT staff. We have a lot of architecture, project deployment, consulting, cybersecurity, prevention and things of that nature. So there's a lot of ways that we can interface and help organizations and businesses leverage technology to accelerate their growth or achieve their mission, whatever it is they're trying to do. And so for today, we'll quickly cover, I just want to take a moment to talk about kind of the suite of apps that live in the Microsoft Power Platform. There's Power Apps, Power Virtual Agents, Power Automate, which is what we're going to spend most of the time speaking to today, and then also Power BI. We're not going to spend any time on Power BI. We did a full webinar on Power BI with an expert that was pretty recent, so we can certainly share that in our follow-up communication to this webinar. I don't know if Ryan has it on hand. If he wants to drop it in the comments, that could be something we could do too. But really, our focus is going to be on Power Automate. And just to kind of cover what you can do with some of these applications, it's really designed for a few different camps. So there's makers and creators, users, that's me, I'm not any of the other things, administrators and developers. So makers and creators uses something called Power Apps Studio, and this is an app designer used for building Canvas apps. So the app designer makes creating apps feel more like actually using a PowerPoint, which is kind of nice. So it's like low code or no code in some cases. The app designer for model-driven apps lets you define the sitemap and components to build a model. So kind of like wireframing, using something called Power Apps Portal Studio, which is WYSIWYG, which stands for what you see is what you get. And that's a design tool that you can add and configure web pages, components, forms, and lists. The Canvas app really is a design and build from Canvas, like I mentioned, with like similar to Microsoft PowerPoint. So again, no code, drag and drop, very similar to PowerPoint. Trying to just look through some of the other mentions I have here. And then if you're an admin, there is a full, it's called the Power Platform Admin Center. So you can actually create different user environments here, real-time recommendations. You can create a lot of automation and also view your analytics. So it's like if you think about like the administrative portal for your Office 365 or something, it's where you're going to have a lot more at your fingertips. And then if you're a developer, you can have what's called Dataverse Developer. This is a model-driven app for developers, and it's similar to the Canvas apps that I just mentioned. So I know I'm probably speaking a foreign tongue for most folks, but just know that depending on what hat you wear, there's a place for you to utilize these platforms inside of the Microsoft ecosystem. And just a couple of examples or screenshots. This is a screenshot of an asset tracking and maintenance portal. And Shane, I know you had grabbed this, so I don't know which camp would have been the one to design this.
Yeah, I can just touch on this real quick, Eric. So this is in Power Apps, right? So everything you just mentioned is the Power Apps piece of this. We're not going to get too deep into Power Apps, but we wanted to show a few quick examples of what you can do in it. So this is a good example of using the Power Apps Canvas, which is just like the general Power Apps app, to build apps for tablets, mobile devices, even desktop. Most commonly, it's going to be on tablets or mobile devices. So this is just a really good example of, like you said, they're kind of in like this PowerPoint or Office app viewer, building out this app, and you can choose the different screens and the layouts. This example specifically is a company tracking their different maintenance vehicles or maintenance assets. And when they're due for inspections, right? So you can see it kind of has an overview tab, an inspection history, and an alerting tab. So just a really good example of something that you can build out in Power Apps. Power Apps is a little bit more on the code side, so it does require a little understanding and knowledge of the logic behind code, even though Microsoft calls it a low-code solution, which is why we're not diving too deep into it today. But we just wanted to showcase a little bit about what it can do.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. If I didn't address that clearly enough, that those are for apps. And again, we're going to be talking about Power Automate, which used to be called Microsoft Flow, if that clears any of the confusion thereof. So another one, this is a web portal concept for external users. So this is also something that was built using Power Apps, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct, Shane?
Yep, you got it. And this is just a little bit more complex of a version, right? So I believe this is actually in the Power Apps desktop app. And you can see this example along the left-hand side there has a lot more components. And this would be like a website or a web portal for external users for this company to interact with their clients or customers. And it just goes to showcase, right? You can do the apps for like your internal use, like we just showed with the maintenance inspection app that might go on iPads or tablets across your staff. And then you can also build these portals for external use as like a website.
Nice. And this one here is like the chatbots, like the
Power Virtual Agents.
Thank you. The naming convention for Microsoft, Power Virtual Agents. So think chatbot on your website where something automatically pops up. You can create the flows and triggers. So if someone asks, a certain question, you can trigger that response. You can set this stuff up. This is just a screenshot of what that can look like. So again, we're not spending much time here. This is just to speak to what some of those other things are. And then, of course, Power BI, which we had mentioned. This is a business intelligence platform. Really, it's meant to create visual dashboards for data that maybe different departments are using, sales, customer service, et cetera. Again, we had a really comprehensive webinar that covered this whole entire product, so we can share that with you. So anyone that is interested can go much deeper there. And as you can see in this screenshot here, Power Automate used to be called Microsoft Flow. I think you actually do create flows, but maybe that's why they changed the naming there. But this stuff changes quite frequently. It wasn't that long ago that it was called Flow. So just to show you that this is kind of what it looks like, that you can do these things and get these flows in different applications, whether on your desktop, mobile, or tablet.
Great.
And Shane, if you're ready to take over, I will stop sharing my screen and let you share yours. And we are going to get into a full-on demonstration here of how to build out some of these flows.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for kind of the lay of the land there, Eric. I think it's super helpful to get a feel for all of these different apps, like Eric was saying, as I'm pulling up my demonstration screen here. Like Eric was saying, there's a lot of moving pieces in this Power Platform, right? So there's the Power Apps, Power Automate, Power Virtual Agents, and Power BI. And they can all work together in different ways. Given that we have, about 40, 45 minutes to talk about all of this today, we're just going to scratch the surface with Power Automate. So we're going to show you a few cool examples in Power Automate today, how to use it, how to get started with it a little bit, and then we'll actually test out some of these examples and use them in this demo environment to show you how they work. So kind of to start this off here, I'm just going to walk through the different ways that you can access Power Automate. And then we'll go through a little bit about how to use it, and then we'll show you some of these examples. So first up, accessing Power Automate. The easiest and probably the best way to interact with Power Automate on just a very basic level is through a web browser. And so if you go to portal.office.com, office.com, portal.microsoft.com, any of those apps to access Outlook or OneDrive, SharePoint, all of those, you're going to get your Office portal here. And Power Automate is going to be one of the top Office 365 apps. And if you click on that, that's going to open up your Microsoft Power Automate app in the web browser. We'll get into kind of the specifics of accessing this here. You can also go directly to flow.microsoft.com to get into Power Automate. It may require you to sign in again if you've never signed in the browser you're opening, so keep that in mind. And then the other easy way to access Power Automate is through Microsoft Teams. So within Microsoft Teams, there are these additional apps that you can add down this side menu. And if we click on More Added Apps, you can see and find any and all of the apps. I'm going to add 3 apps real quick that are going to be very related to Power Automate today. So the first one is actually right here on the screen, Approvals. I'm going to go ahead and click that. And I'm actually going to right click it and choose to pin it to my sidebar there. The second one, and I'll explain what each of these do a little bit more in detail when we get into the examples. But the second one is Tasks by Planner, just so I can see my planner tasks. So I'm going to go ahead and pin that. And then the third, and of course most important, is Power Automate. So if we go ahead and search here for Power Automate, it's going to pull that up. And I'm going to open that one up. You will have to manually add this one if you've never opened this app before. So those other ones were kind of pre-baked into Teams, but this one you have to go ahead and choose to add. So I'll go ahead and click Add. And that's going to take a quick second, and then it's going to bring me up to Power Automate on the screen. You should be able to then also drag and pin this, there we go, to your sidebar. So this is going to be very similar to the web-based version within Power Automate here, and you'll see as we go through these examples, all of our different flows and everything will show up here, and there's templates, and you can create different aspects of it within Teams. So those are kind of the 2 easiest ways to access Teams, or sorry, to access Power Automate. There are a couple other kind of indirect ways. So one is there's a Power Automate desktop app that you can download. Now this does require additional licensing, so keep that in mind. The Power Automate desktop is going to be more for developers and users who are connecting it to different databases and data connectors in order to tie Power Automate into Power Apps and Power BI and maybe even Power Virtual Agents. So that's not what we're going to be getting into here today, but it is a possibility. And then alongside the desktop app, there is also a browser extension if you do choose to use the desktop app and have the prerequisite licensing and everything, when you install the desktop app, it will have a browser extension to tie in web scripting and web testing, and you can set up, there's very complex Power Automate flows that you can set up for filling out web forms and doing API calls. Again, that's a little deeper than we want to get here today. So for the sake of time, I'm going to kind of just skim over that. If you guys have specific questions on those more complex topics, feel free to reach out to us directly, and we're happy to kind of get more involved and discuss that. And then the other indirect way that you can access Power Automate is through other apps in the Microsoft 365 environment. So I've already pulled up a few examples here. But you'll see if you go to your OneDrive in the browser, and this is going to be true of several different apps. A couple of common ones are OneDrive and SharePoint. You'll see across the top here, there is an automate button. And so once you get into this process and you start creating automations or flows in Microsoft Power Automate, then you'll see them here. So you can see I don't have any really listed in OneDrive yet because this is a brand new demo tenant, but this is where your flows will see if you have ones that you call to action, if you have to manually run them.
So just to clarify, Shane,
Yeah.
you can create them from your OneDrive and elsewhere. Is there a recommended way that you ought to be doing that?
I would say the recommended way is what we'll show today, which is in the web browser. So like to your point, if I click create a flow, yes, you can go through and build like a very simple templated flow from your OneDrive right here. But if you go to see your flows, or if you click through one of these, it's going to take you back into the Power Automate web browser or website. So this feature, to your point, Eric, is more designed to click and then find a flow that you have related to OneDrive and run it right from here. Another good example is in Microsoft Dynamics. So if you use Dynamics 365, which is a CRM and ERP tool, the automate or flow is built right into this app. You're going to see this across a lot of different Microsoft apps. This is just one I wanted to call out because there are a lot of different flows you can generate for this type of app. So you can see here, this example tenant already has a lot of automations or flows built into the environment. So you could go in and run these tasks that someone has already generated. So this is, again, this would be a space where you would go to run a flow you've already created. I wouldn't really recommend creating your flows directly from these apps. All right, so now that we've kind of called out all of the different places you can get to flows, I do want to point out before we jump into a little bit more detail on Power Automate, this is like a development environment, right? When you're going in here and you're creating these flows and these automations, whether that be in Power Automate or Power Apps, etc., you are in a development environment. So there may be some minor hiccups and you have to test these as you create them, that sort of stuff. So just keep that in mind every once in a while when you go to connect some of these different tools and apps that we're using in Power Automate. It may error out on you when you try and sign in. If that type of thing happens when you're testing this out or working in this environment, I would really just recommend trying it again, maybe trying a different browser, closing out and signing back in. All of those are little tips and tricks. They are actively, like Eric said, kind of like changing the structure and the naming from Microsoft Flow to Power Automate. And so there's going to be different bits and pieces in here where the label might be a flow, but you're in Power Automate, or maybe you're in Microsoft Flow and the label is an automation. It can get a little confusing. So just keep that in mind as we walk through this. So showing just a little bit of the lay of the land for Power Automate. This is kind of your home page for your Power Automate environment. Again, flow.microsoft.com if you want to follow along, we'll get you there. And we're just going to walk through this left-hand menu real quick to show you how to get around here. So right up top, you've got the home button, and then we're going to have action items, which are approvals and business processes. We're going to showcase an approval later in this demo, but essentially that's where you would go to access different approvals that have been sent to you so that you can approve those tasks. And then moving down the list here, we have our My Flows. And so My Flows are going to show you all of the flows or automations that you have already created. So if you don't have any, which we don't right now, it's just going to tell you don't have any flows. And you'll see as we build these out, you'll get a list of the different flows here. There are different categories of flows, so I do want to call that out. There are the cloud flows, which are what we're dealing with today. Those are the ones you can just quickly and seamlessly create in a browser or in Microsoft Teams and you're off to the races. There are different types of cloud flows. So the three main types are instant, automated, and scheduled. As the names kind of imply, instant means it's the type of flow that you take an action, you press a button, and that flow runs and does what you told it to do. Automated are actions that are going to be automated. So something that you tell in advance, when this happens, then do that. So kind of an if this, then that flow. And then scheduled are scheduled tasks. So those are flows that you go in and create and you say, run this every day at this time. Desktop flows are going to be flows that you have generated from the Microsoft Power Automate desktop app. So we won't be diving too far into those. And then business process flows are also tied back to other data services in the Microsoft environment. That's going to be related to Power Apps and Power BI and other services. We won't be showing how to connect those today just because those do require a bit more understanding of the development environment in Microsoft 365, as well as usually admin credentials depending upon your tenant and your company's environment. So moving down the list here, there's a create option to create brand new flows from scratch. There's templates, which we'll dive into a lot today to show you some different templates and how to create these flows. Connectors is going to showcase all of the different tools or services that you can tie into Microsoft Flows. So this doesn't have to be just Microsoft 365 apps. As you can see here, you can use things like Twitter. So, when this person tweets, do this in my environment, RSS feeds for email, and the list goes on. There's all kinds of other connectors that are outside of the Microsoft environment. You can also see here some of them have a premium label, so they may require additional licensing or an upfront payment to get access to those types of connectors. Or you may require, depending upon the app, it may require that you have licensing for that app or that solution.
I did get a question from Gary that asked, can Power Automate replace Microsoft Access Database? I don't know that. I think maybe it could work with an Access database, kind of like Shayna just mentioned, where you have to tie into some sort of data. There's ways that you could create a flow from that or an automation.
Yeah, thanks for calling that out, Eric. Gary, I would say that other pieces of the Power Platform would be what replace it. Power Automate is more the tool to tell it what to do when and how to do the things that you want it to do automatically. But the other databases and stuff are where you would kind of tie in to replace something like a Microsoft Access database. Cool. So that's connectors. And then we are not going to spend too much time on these other ones. I'll call them out, just mention what they are. I kind of already hinted at them though. Data is where you would go to tie in other databases and connections. Again, this is more of a developer and admin space where you would create different databases using Power BI or even SQL databases, and the list goes on. And then all of these other ones, monitoring your flows is just a way where you can see all of your different flows and activities. You can see these from your My Flows section. So those are going to be very similar. And then AI Builder and Process Advisor are pieces that tie back into those data connectors I mentioned. So we don't have to worry about those today. We're going to kind of stick with just the general flows and the templates. So kind of shifting gears here, we're going to actually create some of these to show you how we can use this in our environment. So first up, we're going to do a couple of automated flows. So things that when something happens, the environment is going to take an action and do something else. So I've already pulled these up here on the side, but the first one we're going to do is we are going to set up a flow from a template here to post messages to a team when a new task is created in Planner. So first things first, you can search for this in your templates tab. You can also just go into your templates and kind of peruse here to find different flows and stuff. But we're going to go ahead and click on this one, the Microsoft Teams when a new task is created in Planner. And the first thing it's going to show you when you click on a new template is what services that template or that flow is going to use. So in this example, pretty basic, right? We're using just Planner and Microsoft Teams. If you've never set up a flow, it's also going to ask you to connect these services. You can go ahead and click the plus button and sign into these, or if you just hit continue, it will kind of automatically try and connect into these services. If they're Microsoft 365 services that you already use, you should get a green check mark. We are getting an invalid connection error, and it looks like it resolved itself. So again, development environment, you may get warnings and errors as you do some of this, so just keep trying to redo and retest things if that happens. So once you've kind of generated this flow, or sorry, created this flow, it's going to ask you to put in some specific details. And you can see here, this example only has fields that are required. Some flows, as we get further into this, will have fields that aren't required, but you may want to fill out or add or change as appropriate. So the first half of this is the planner. So we need to tell it what plan or project environment in Planner do we want the environment to be looking at for this flow. And if we click this, and if you have recently accessed a plan, it is going to show you that recently accessed plan here in the plan IDs. If you don't see the plan ID that you're looking for, you do have to hunt down this hash or this code for this plan. So to do that, just to kind of show you real quick, we are going to use the Mark 8 project plan, so I'll go ahead and click it in here. But just in case you need to know how to find that ID, right, because you won't be able to type in the name of the plan manually, if you go to Planner, which is at tasks.office.com, and you go into a plan, across the URL here up on top, I'll highlight it so you can see it, is the plan ID, right? So you're going to grab that hash or that tag for that plan, and you'll then go back to your flow and you paste it in there and it would resolve with the name of the plan. Again, that's a little bit confusing and not a lot of stuff in Power Automate is like that. A lot of it is going to be drop-down menus and things like that, but there are going to be scenarios where you're going to have to go hunt down a plan ID or other information that you may not know. So you're just going to have to get creative on how you find that. I honestly just stumbled upon this on the planner side that it was in the URL. So once we've got our plan tied in with the planner, we can move to the next step here, which is about posting that message into the Teams environment.
Shane, there was a question that came through from
Sure.
Raul here in the comments. He asked, do you think other RPA tools like UiPath, Blue Prism are going to affect Power Automate, and how is Power Automate different? I think the big thing from what I have seen, just on a quick search, is Power Automate is baked into the Microsoft ecosystem. Depending on the licensing that you might already have or need, I think it may be more cost effective than something like UiPath, which looks to be fairly pricey. And there's also other ones out there like Zapier. So there's a number of these out there. I think the reason we're showcasing this one by and large is because it's really baked into the Microsoft ecosystem. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Shane.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. I think you nailed a lot of that. The other caveat here is the RPA piece of this, which is robotic process automation. Like you said, there's a lot of other apps and stuff out there. You are required to purchase additional RPA licensing from Microsoft to use the desktop flows. So that's when we get into connecting other databases and stuff like that. So that's really the only caveat here, is keep that in mind. I want to say the licensing on that is like $40 a user a month. So it may be similar pricing to those other apps. If you can do what you need to do with these desktop or with these Cloudflow examples that we're showing today, I would say absolutely use Power Automate. I don't know enough about the desktop app to say if it would make sense to switch away from another solution, unless it's really just a cost thing. Thanks, Eric. All right, so we're gonna keep going here with this flow, and we're gonna add the teams half of it. So again, these are required fields. So we're going to have to pick a team that this is going to post in. Since we're posting from the Mark 8 project plan, let's go ahead and choose the Mark 8 project team that we have already created in Teams. And then it's going to ask us to pick a channel. We'll go ahead and just real simple, we're going to choose it to post into the general channel. This Teams app will drop down and show you all of the teams and channels that you have access to in your environment. So you don't have to worry about hunting down some sort of team ID or anything like that. And then this last field, bear with me here. This last field, the message section, is going to be where you're going to tell it what it's going to post. So I'm going to leave this field alone, right? So you'll see it's going to post the name of the new task, the due date, and who created that task. And actually, I lied. I'm going to delete this created by field because I don't need to see that. It's going to post the name of the person in the team. So you can modify this message, and then you can see there's these dynamic content tags that you can tie into here. So this is where you can get a little bit more creative. If you wanted this message to say something more specific, you could actually you could change the text in here, or you could add other dynamic content fields. And you see if I scroll down the side here, it's showing me all of the different dynamic content fields that can pull from Planner. Just bear in mind, make sure you read through these thoroughly before you add them to your message, and make sure that you test it to make sure you're going to get the output that you want. A lot of these you'll see are like, this is the actual title of the task, right? Value title. But then value ID, the ID of the task would be just a random string or a bunch of characters for that task. We're not going to want to post that in a Teams message. So just again, be cognizant of the values that you're choosing and clicking in here, but you can go through and see which ones make sense for you. And as we do more of these flows, you'll see there's different dynamic content pieces for the different types of apps that we'll be using. So once you've finished filling out all of the required fields, you can go ahead and click Save. You could also modify this template. So if there was other more complex aspects or flows that you wanted to implement, you could go ahead and choose a new step. But we're going to go ahead and just save this and test it out. So once I hit save, you're going to see saving across the top, and it's just going to take a moment here, and you'll get kind of a green message once it has officially saved, if it officially saved. And while that's kind of loading here, we did get another question from Raul. Is there any tips or tricks to test dynamic content values apart from running an entire flow? Unfortunately, not that I am aware of. You can choose this test option in the upper right corner, but I believe that's going to do the same thing, and it's going to post into the team. So you do have to like test the output. This may be a way to like shortcut if you have a really long, complex flow. You can shortcut having it run through that whole process and just test it here. But short of that, I think it is still going to just post it, and you're going to have to test it and delete it out of the environment. A good way to do that may be to stand up a demo tenant if you're doing a lot of testing and changing in that stuff. And then again, the descriptions are pretty accurate and useful if you read through them. So now that that has saved, it looks like we have already generated some messages. I think I got an email that said someone assigned me a task. So thank you, Alex, for assigning me the task to call SWICKtech. And I'm guessing that that task was generated in the Mark 8 project plan. So if we go to this project plan, or sorry, if we go into this team and I told it to post that task in the Mark 8 project team, it is not quite here yet. So we'll come back and show you how
It does
those.
take a minute for some of these things to like start populating and generating. So if you don't see it immediately, don't panic. It does take a little bit for it to run through the system. So in some of these cases, we're going to circle back to some of these so we can show them.
Perfect. Thanks, Eric. And if you do want to check on them, you can go back into your. And of course, the second I step away, I get another notification. But I'm gonna ignore those for a second, and we'll keep going here. If you want to check on a flow, if you go back, and yes, you can say leave this page. Often, again, development environment. Oftentimes, even though you have saved this, you're going to get a message that says, "Hey, if you leave this, you may lose unsaved messages." Okay, so now it will show this flow in Power Automate, and you can see the run history here. And so when we refresh this, you're going to see this has never ran before. So we'll, like Eric said, they can take some time. We'll kind of jump into the next one, and then we'll go back and showcase this example once it has run, and we'll show you kind of what the output looks like in Teams. So the next one is a very similar example. It's another automated solution. And what we are going to do for this one is we're going to post a Teams message when we receive or flag an email in our Office 365 environment. So I've searched for it and found the specific automation that I'm looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and click into this automation. And again, it's going to ask me to connect my Outlook or my email and my Teams environments into Power Automate. We'll give it a second here. It's kind of thinking. And you can see now that I've already used a flow for Microsoft Teams that it is already a valid connection. I'm going to go ahead and click continue. It's going to ask me to, or it's going to attempt to sync the Outlook email, and it looks like it worked just fine there. So it's going to let me continue. If those are external apps, you may have to click that plus button and sign into an account externally. All right, so this is a bit more complex of a flow, right? We've got our Outlook aspect on top of getting a new email. And then we have what it does if the condition of that email that we set makes sense. So for this example, we are going to use the inbox folder, and I'm just going to show you this. I'm not going to make these changes to complicate this flow, but you can configure this to choose the type of email. One second.
I got the same message on my end here, Shane. I do see, while we're looking at what's going on there, Renee asked, why did you say this is a developer environment with errors? Wouldn't it be a production version error-free in an operational company?
Cool. Thank you for the question, Renee. Yes, it is technically like we're in the production version of Flow. What I mean by that is that Power Automate is really designed, your crafting and generating logic or code-based solutions or automations to do stuff. And so there is, and you'll see like when we generate these flows and stuff, often the save feature will pop up and say, hey, great job, you created this automation. Please test it and make sure it works. So it's not that we should run into all kinds of errors all the time. I just want to call out that you are generating and creating essentially apps and code-based solutions that you're running in your environment. And so they are a little bit more complex than just accessing your email. So it's just, it can be a little bit different and a little bit more, I don't want to say buggy because that's not the right word for it, but there's just a few more hurdles and hiccups to jump through as you're getting used to this and learning, what can you do with Power Automate and what can't you do.
And what I think the other point too, Shane, it may be the case that it's good to make sure that your output is what you wanted it to be. Like some of those conditions that you wanted to take away or add or what have you, to make sure that it's doing what you thought it was going to be doing in the format that you'd prefer.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Cool, so it looks like this refreshed for us. And so like I was saying, when you are receiving a new email, you can add a bunch of conditions here, right? So you can say who that email is sending to. So a good example might be, let's say we want to set up a flow to post a message in Teams every time the entire sales staff receives an email, right? So maybe you have sales@contoso.com is your email address for the sales team, and 6 or 8 people get that email, and you're on that team. So every time someone sends it to that address, you want this flow to run and post a message in the sales channel or the sales team saying that we've gotten a new message. I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to modify these fields just for sake of simplicity's sake here today, but you can go ahead and do so, right? So you can do the exact opposite. You can choose a from sender, right? So maybe you want this flow to run every time you receive an email from Eric at SWICKtech.com to let you know you've got a message from Eric on the Teams channel. And then you can adjust the importance. You can make it flag only on items that are attachments, so on and so forth. Again, I'm not going to modify those options just for simplicity of showing you how these flows work, but you can go ahead and go in there and do those. And then once you've determined what folder and what other modifications you want to apply to the incoming emails, you can then move to the team step. And so the flow here is if that email meets those criteria, go ahead and post a message in Teams. If it doesn't, we're going to do nothing. You could also add an action that does something else or posts maybe a different message when it doesn't meet those requirements. But that would be a little over the top to receive those messages for all of your emails. So then we can go ahead and say what team we want this to post to. So in my example, like I said, we're going to have this post to the sales and marketing team. And we're going to have it posted straight into the general channel. And then in the message again, we're going to have the option to change this message field and add different pieces to it. So you can add just text into here, or you can maybe change, maybe you want the subject to show up in here, and then we'll space it out and a preview of the body of the email. You can see here, you can add like the importance field. Keep in mind, this is when you're adding these tags, they're just going to show that information. So just because you choose the subject tag here, it's not going to explain what that information is in Teams. And so you may want to go in and type in the word subject ahead of this so that it makes sense. And you can add other text and change this content as you see fit. For this example, we're going to just leave it at that, and we'll go ahead and save this. All right, so now as you can see, saying our flow is ready to go, we recommend you test it. So you could run the test up here. We're going to just go ahead and give it a shot. And we'll go and have someone send us an email, Eric and or Ryan, if you don't mind. And while we're waiting on that, I'm going to jump back to the previous flow. So you may remember we said when those tasks are created in Planner, we want you to post a notice or a message in Teams. And so you can see here, Miriam is my account. So that's who created this flow, is posting this message that there was a new task created, and it's going to show you the name of the task and the due date that was marked on that task. This is the information that we posted or that we put in that flow. So keep in mind, as you change that message content, it's going to change it here. And then it looks like I just received a new email from Alex. And so that will post in our sales and marketing channel, which I don't see here. Oh, there we go. And so again, another example, this does take a moment or two, but we'll come back to this channel to show you how those messages post in it. So those are a couple examples of the automation flows or the automated flows. If you go back to your My Flows and we go to the Cloud Flows, you're going to now see those in here. You can go in and edit them and share them. You can click the ellipses and delete them. All kinds of options. You can view the run history, the analytics of this flow, on and on. You can also see that those are both automated flows. So those are things that are just going to happen in the environment in an if this, then that capacity. I will call out, if you do choose to share flows, be cognizant that some flows will work when you share them and some won't. And it seems to really be dependent upon what that flow needs access to run. So for example, if I share a flow with Eric that is about me, or in this case, Miriam is my demo account, is about Miriam receiving emails, well, Eric doesn't have access to my mailbox, right? Hopefully not, at least. Maybe in some environments, colleagues will share mailboxes and stuff, and then it would work. But if I share this with Eric, it's going to try and access my email. If he wants the same flow, he could then go in and edit that. But in the immediate capacity of sharing it, it won't work for him. It's going to error out. So just keep that in mind when you're sharing them. Be cognizant of the features and applications that each flow has access to, and if that other person is going to be able to use it. All right, so moving from automated flows, we're going to jump over to an instant flow. And so instant flows are a lot more about when you do an action, when you take an action, do this task in the environment. So these are a lot more related to your mobile apps and mobile environment. So Eric, if you don't mind sharing your screen real quick and showing just a little bit about what this looks like before I jump into it. All right, great. So this is what Power Automate for mobile looks like. This is an app just like Outlook, OneDrive, Word, Excel, etc. You can install it on Android or iOS. And this app is designed to allow you to create automations or flows that you can run directly from your phone. So like I said, we're going to showcase how to create these. I won't show you how to do it on my phone here, but I will actually do it so we can test it today. But you can see, you can go in and you have kind of a similar setup to create mobile templates and buttons. And then on this middle screen here, the buttons tab is where you'll have those literal buttons on your phone. So once we create this, you'll be able to pull up your Power Automate app on your phone and click the button to run that automation and have it do what you told it to do in your Microsoft environment.
It's pretty cool. It's almost like the Amazon Dash button. You know, you have the ability to create something maybe not as powerful as that, but you get the idea.
Yeah, very similar concept. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and take back over here, Eric. Thank you for bringing that up. All right, and so the example I want to showcase today is we are going to set up a button in our mobile app again to instantly block off an hour on our Office 365 calendar. So a great example or a great use case for this might be if you need to step out of the office for an hour, you can generate a calendar event that's going to throw on your calendar and show you as out of office, and it will notify your team in Teams and in Outlook that you're out of the office. Another example, maybe you just want to block off some time to show that you're busy doing something. Maybe you need an hour of focus time real quick. You can just hit that button rather than having to go into your calendar and create the event. So we're going to go ahead and continue. All this needs is access to our Outlook email and calendar. And so really simple, right? We're going to manually trigger this flow. So that's the button feature I was talking about. Nothing to change there. And then you just need to tell it what calendar and the subject and a few other details here. So calendar, when you select a calendar, the name calendar is going to be just your immediate calendar. If you have access to other people's calendars, or maybe you have a holidays calendar listed in your Outlook, different things like that, you'll see those here too. So just be cognizant and make sure you're selecting the right calendar you want to post this to. And then you can change the name of this to show what that topic might be. So maybe you want to put this to say out of office or focus time or something or whatever else, right? You can just type in the subject there. You can add dynamic content to this as well, just like all of the other apps. So if you want it to like show a specific timestamp or a date, so on and so forth, you can have it post that different information. And then the start time and end time is just when you want this to implement. So this is where we get into using formulas or expressions in Flow. And you can see this flow already automatically created these for me, right? So you can see this is the now timestamp. So the start time of this calendar event is going to be when I action on this flow, when I hit that button on my mobile device. We won't change that, we'll leave that alone. And then the end time is going to be the amount of time, right? So we're using an expression to say 1 hour from now. So if we click into this, you can change this here too, right? So if we want it to be maybe 2 hours, you could update that to 2. If you want it to be a set end time and a set start time, you could add those in here. And you'll see, you can kind of scroll through and see a lot of the different expressions that you can use, and you can change that up and test different ones out. And
Sorry to be
then,
jumping ahead here, but I have a question
yeah.
here. So, you know, if you create an Outlook appointment on your calendar, you can select free, working elsewhere, tentative, busy, out of office, etc. I'm asking if that's an option because if you're also using Microsoft Bookings, this specific flow could be really helpful if you are out for lunch
Block
or
off
you
time.
are working from home and you have to jump to help a kid or whatever it is you have going on. If you press that button, if it actually shows you as out of office, that bookings feature, if you're using that, someone can't book that time in your calendar. So
Yes, you stole my thunder, Eric, but I'll allow it this time.
because I love
Uh,
bookings so much.
and I can tell by your example that you have children. I also know that, but so yeah, if you hit that advanced options when you're generating this event, there's a lot more fields and features that you can add to this event. So you can change up the time zone. You can require attendees. So if you want to create a button that blocks off multiple people's calendars, you can add other attendees. You can add a message in the body of your calendar event if you want to get real specific and explain what it's about. And then you can add a location, level of importance, on and on. The one you're talking about is the show as field down here, Eric. And so you can say it by default, it's going to set it to show as busy, but you can drop this down and choose any of the traditional options in Microsoft Outlook, right? So free, tentative, busy, out of office, working elsewhere,
And
on and
why
on.
that's important to call out is if you are on Teams, your status message or your reticle by your user icon or name will show that you are like out of office or what have you. So it's good for
Yep.
other people to then know.
So I chose out of office, and I'm going to go ahead and save this flow. And I know we're short on time, so I'm going to kind of run through this a little quick here. But instantly, I will see in my app on my phone that I now have that button to block off my calendar. If I go ahead and hit that right away, we'll show you just how to test this real quick, and then we'll jump into the next one. It's going to run on your phone and right away. So this again, this is an instant flow, right? Not an automated one. So it's not running through a bunch of processes. It's doing exactly what you told it to do at the exact time you press this button on your phone. And so you'll see that calendar event popped up on my calendar and set me as out of office for the next, it should be if I switch to day view here for the next hour. So one last quick example, you can, and I won't actually showcase this one just because we're short on time and I want to allow room for questions and everything, but you can create a daily summary of planner tasks in your Outlook. So this is an example of a scheduled task where you could go in and you could tell this task, hey, every day at 8 a.m., I want you to look at this planner or this planner plan, right? So we can choose a specific plan just like we did earlier in the automated task. And I want you to send me an email summary of all the tasks in that plan to my email. Again, really, simple connections. It just requires Planner and Outlook. And when we go into continue here, this is a bit more complex. So this is going to be one you're going to walk through every detail. And so you're going to see it runs at 9 a.m. every day. You can edit that if you'd like. You're going to have to come in and enter in fields that aren't filled out. So a lot of these you shouldn't have to touch, right? They're already filled out for you based on the template. But if you want to get creative and modify these, you can test that out and change it in different ways. And then down at the bottom, you're going to choose the plan of buckets that you want to list. Buckets are just the term for the different categories in your planner app. So you can choose a plan. And then again, you may have to go hunt down that plan ID, and then it's going to list all the tasks from that plan too. And then you would scroll through and make sure this is going to show you all the details you want. And there may be additional fields to fill out, right? Who do I want to send this email to? Sorry if I'm going a little quick. I know we're running out of time here, but you could choose who you want to send it to and update the body and everything. So if I'm going to send this to myself, and then we would hit save here. If you didn't fill out a field, no worries. It's going to warn you that you missed something and tell you it's required. And And then once that saves, now that would run at 9 a.m. every day, and it's going to send me an email with all of those planner tasks baked in. Just to show you, just to make sure those other options posted, it does look like I've got a handful of emails already. And so you can see that those emails that I received are now posted in that sales and marketing general channel. These are very basic, right? All I did was include the subject and then the body of the email. So you're going to want to go in and organize that message so that it's structured appropriately so you get actually useful information in your Teams posts. But this is, again, just an example to show you that it will spit that right into that Teams channel and show you the information from the email. Cool. And I think that is pretty much everything we've got. One last item that I did want to touch on that we didn't really get to today is approvals. And I won't dive in and show you an actual example of this, but approvals are a way that you can use Power Automate to send approval requests to different people. So a great example of this is when you add a document to a SharePoint library or a OneDrive folder, it's going to send an email to your manager or your coworkers and ask them to approve it. So you can set that up in Power Automate or in Teams. And you'll see if we go into Teams and go to approvals, this is where you could approve them and create a new approval request. Or if you search in Power Automate, if we go back to our kind of browsing tab for templates, there's a whole section of approvals that you can set up. And you can go in and select one of these, right, so start approval when a new item is added. This is where you would choose when an item is added to a SharePoint library. You can pick whatever SharePoint site and library or folder in the documents that you want. I want this to request approval from these 3 people. It would then send them a notice in Teams and post it in their approvals tab. And then they would also receive an email asking them to approve it with the link to that document. All right, I think that's everything we've got today, Eric. In the interest of time, I think we can just maybe mention our webinar. Yep, okay, you got it, go for it.
Yeah, just as a final note, everybody, thanks so much for joining us today. Hopefully you were able to learn something and have a takeaway of being able to go do one of these and starting with the template. There will be a survey coming out tomorrow, and as well as a follow-up email with more information, recap, a link to the video in case we went too fast, etc. And our next webinar is going to be February 17th, so not too far from now. It's kind of around the corner, and we're going to be partnering with Fortinet on this one. So really, this is important for any business leader. It's not going to be a deep technical dive into how to do anything on the Fortinet stack, but talk about more of their products and what the business benefits and outcomes can be by using some of their gear. So it looks like Ryan just shared a link there. If that's something you're interested or want to learn more about from them and us at SWICKtech, it should be another great event. So thank you again, everybody, for attending. Hope you have a great rest of the week.
Thanks, Eric. And yeah, I do want to just call out, we'll hang out here for a minute for any questions, but if you do have specific questions or troubles as you're starting to use this, feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to try and answer any follow-up questions after the fact too. Cool, so it looks like we do have a question from Raul. Is an individual person flow set up different from backend run flows? For example, if you have a generic invoice processing in the backend, how can those connections be managed in such cases? So good question, Raul. A lot of those cloud flows that I showcased today are kind of more individual or specific to your account. Now they're going to post things in the Teams environment and do actions in the environment that may alert or notify other people about them. But that is going to be different from generating a flow if you use like the actual RPA desktop solution and connect in data or databases on the back end. Those are going to be more things that would run in the background with an administrative account or a developer account and do more complex tasks. All right, it looks like people are dropping off, so we will sign off here, but thanks everyone for joining.